Hey everyone, it's Zach here from Scenic Sights and Bites. So this is our second wine video. Now our first wine video took you through the process of making a wine from the very beginning to the very end, and it went into all the little details. For somebody who's never made wine before is going to want to know how to clean, how to sanitize, the whole works. So if you're brand new to winemaking, go back and check out that video. We made a Merlot wine, and this is it here. I'm actually enjoying a glass of my Merlot wine right now, and boy is it good. Now today we're going to be making a Gewurztraminer, and that's a tough one to say. I got to tell you, I actually had to look up the pronunciation just before the video to make sure I was saying it right, because it is such a hard word. Gewurztraminer. Anyways, so this is the kit. It's a Kenridge Classics wine kit, and I'm going to show you everything that comes in it. Now I already opened the box, but inside you're going to find your instructions, and these are generic instructions that they use for a lot of their kits. So yeah, so you're going to find some parts of the instructions may or may not apply to what you're doing, but for the most part they're pretty good. Then we've also got a pack of different contents, and we've got the bag of juice. Now there's 10 liters of Gewurztraminer juice in here. In the package, you will find that they give us some chitosan, bentonite, sorbate, fusel, and yeast. And the ones we're going to be using today are the bentonite and the yeast. So I'm going to put the other ones away. Everything has already been done ahead of time here. So all of my equipment has been washed, and you don't use regular detergent. You should know that. You want to use some detergent that's specially designed for this type of food grade work, and then sanitized as well. So same thing, you want to get a proper sanitizer, and you can refer to the other video or look it up, but I used sodium metasulfite for that. Okay, so let's get started. First things first, clean, sanitize everything. Perfect, we did that. Make sure everything's at room temperature. It is. Pour 2 liters of hot tap water into the primary fermenter, and then stir in the bentonite. Now, that's kind of a tough thing, because the bentonite's a clay substance and it doesn't stir in very well. So what I like to do is I like to actually, when I remember, I like to stir it into the 2 cups of hot water in the measuring cup first, and then put that into the primary fermenter. It doesn't totally ever dissolve, and that stuff doesn't end up in your wine, but I just find it's easier to mix that way. Okay, so it doesn't have to be exactly 2 liters of hot water, but what I've gone and done, I've stuck about 1.5 liters of hot water into the bottom of the bucket. I've got a couple of cups here that I'm going to use to initially mix the bentonite with, and then if there's any clay residue in there, I'll just add a little bit more hot water and try and get most of that out and put that into the primary fermenter. And then once it's in the primary fermenter, I'll give it a quick stir again. So this is like a clay substance. Try and stir it in as best as possible. And this dissolves, or tries to dissolve, so much nicer this way. I don't know if it makes a big difference if it's really clumpy in the primary fermenter or if you do it this way. My wine has turned out both ways, but I just find this a lot easier to work with. And the reason we don't need to keep track really of how much we're putting in of hot water, you don't want to do too much, because obviously you don't want it to raise the temperature of this too much, but we're filling it up to the 23 liter mark in the end anyways. So that's the number that matters the most. Okay, see, most of it's gone. Let's go bottom here. Let's give that a quick stir. I'm gonna add a little bit more hot water in here to get rid of it. Perfect, good. Okay, so that's our 2 liters. Okay, mix it well like it says, but it's already mixed pretty good. Now we're going to pour the contents of the juice bag into the primary fermenter, and then it says rinse the bag with water to make sure that you're getting all of the juice out. You've got to watch what you're wearing and really be careful when you're doing this. The darker wines can stain. This is a lighter wine, but you still don't really want this stuff getting on your clothes. Okay, so if your tap water is half decent, you can use that to get the rest out. Obviously, the more concentrated juice that you get out of the bag, the better. You're going to have better wine. Give that a quick stir. So next, top it up to the 23-liter mark with good quality cold drinking water. So if you're in the city and your water has a lot of different chemicals, fluoride, a lot of chlorine, all those different things, you can do what I do, and that is fill up a couple of pots with water, and then I've got lids on them right now, but I had the lids off overnight. So you leave that off overnight, and that just lets the gas escape from the water. If you've got too many harsh chemicals, it can actually stop the yeast from working. And you can use bottled spring water for this as well, if you need to, if you're out on an acreage or something. But what you don't want to use is distilled water, okay? Because the yeast in that needs the minerals for it to work properly. So no distilled water, bottled water is fine. Tap water that's been left out, if it's half decent tap water, is fine. And we're just going to fill it up to that 23-liter mark. And this part, you really want to stir it up good. You don't want the water and the juice to be separated for you to get a proper reading with the hydrometer and for the yeast to start working and everything. You really need this mixed up good. So what I do is I mix it up initially with a spoon for a few seconds, and then I take my power mixer with the drill attachment, and I use that to really get a good mix. You don't have to do this, but if you don't do this, you just want to make sure you stir for a really long time. Next step. If your kit contains oak chips or granular oak, stir it in now. If they contain oak cubes, add them later. There is no oak. I'm sure there's no oak. No, there is no oak with this type of wine. There was with the Merlot, but there's not with this. Okay. Now use a hydrometer to measure and record day 1 specific gravity. So I'm going to do that. If you don't know how to do that, just refer back to video 1. Or, refer back to my previous series. I'm not sure which video it's in. It should be in 1, but we did it through a couple of different videos. So. Okay. .086. Okay, so you record that, 1.086. Okay, now that we've done that, it says sprinkle the dry yeast on top of the juice base. If it contains 2 packs of yeast, add them both. This kit only contains 1 pack. Putting it on top has always worked just fine for me for these wine kits. If you're making wine from scratch, you might have to do things differently. That's not what this video is about though. Okay, place a loose fitting lid or primary lid with airlock over top of this. And so taking the lid that came with the bucket, and I just lay it loose on top, that'll allow gases to escape. It allows oxygen to get in. At this stage, it's okay for oxygen to get in there because you need that yeast to work. Where the oxygen becomes a problem is if once it's done the primary fermenting and the fermenting stops or slows right down, that's when you don't want to introduce oxygen, okay? So at this stage, loose fitting lid is great, or a towel, or many other tricks that are out there. Just make sure you don't seal it off completely, because when this starts to ferment and gas starts to build up, it needs to get out and it will find a way out. So Keep the area warm, 28 to 25 degrees Celsius or 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire winemaking process. Okay, so this is going to be sitting for the next 14 days before we even do anything with it. The next step in 14 days, which will just be a blink for you guys, but the next step is going to be stabilizing and degassing. One thing you want to do is keep this up on a table. It doesn't have to be this high, but you want it up on a table that's taller than your glass carboy, because when it comes time to siphoning from the primary into the carboy and from the carboy into the wine, if this is on the floor, when you go to lift it up onto a table, you're going to disturb all the sediment that is settled at the bottom. And the whole point behind not disturbing it is so you don't get that sediment in your next stage or in your bottles. So keep it up on a table the whole time, then you don't have to worry about it. If your room's too cold, use a heat belt to control the temperature. Okay, so I think that's it. I'm going to go take this into the other room where I make my wine. I'm going to let it sit there. I will see you guys then. If you enjoyed the video so far up to this point, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, our channel, Scenic Sights and Bites, we're about wine and food. That includes making food here, restaurant reviews, keto food, all sorts of different kinds of food, and travel. So whether it's going to Vegas, going to Mexico, or traveling around in Alberta or Canada, different parts of Canada, you're going to find it all on our channel. So we hope you click on that red subscribe button and ding on the bell for notifications so you get notified when the next videos come out. Thank you for watching up to this point, and I'll see you soon. Okay, everyone, day 14 or 15 if you're falling a day behind like me. Now, day 14 is the stabilizing degassing day. So the very first thing we have to do is check to see if we are in this proper specific gravity reading. It smells good. I'm going to take a nice sample using the Wine Thief, making sure that we don't go all the way down. We don't want to disturb that sediment at the bottom. Put this in and see what it reads. That is 0.990. And it says we want to be less than 0.996, so I'd say we are where we want to be. Okay, now we're going to get ready to rack it into a glass carboy. We are not doing a secondary fermentation on this wine here because it is not called for in the kit's instruction. With the hose end facing me, I'm going to tape it into place and hopefully it does not move. Okay, I'm going to siphon it up now. Okay, we've siphoned it out. All that's left in here is the sediment. All right, so we finished racking the wine into the glass carboy, siphoning it into the glass carboy. That's racking. You probably already know that. And now this room here is a little bit cold, so to keep it at the proper temperature, I'm taking the primary fermenting bucket and I added a little bit of water. There's about 7 liters of water in there right now. This is after I gave it a cleaning, and we're going to set the glass carboy into the primary fermenting bucket, and then that way we can use it with the heat belt on the plastic without risking damaging the glass. And it's almost like a double boiler type effect. Okay, so you can see by sticking about 7 liters of water in there, when we add the glass carboy to it, it brings it up to about the 22 liter mark. That doesn't really matter at all as long as the water is higher than the level of the belt. Otherwise, it's not going to transfer the heat to the wine. Next thing we're doing is adding the contents of the sulfite sorbate package. We're going to add that directly into the glass carboy. Now at this point you can vigorously stir with a spoon, such as this one that has a narrow paddle. That narrow paddle can fit into the neck of the glass carboy. I don't want to dirty it up, but you can go in there and you can stir it like that for quite a long time, or you can get the power out. And I use this particular model here. And that just attaches to a drill. Now it says do it for 2 to 4 minutes. changing directions every 30 seconds. I'm here to tell you that is not enough, at least not in the area where we live. Different elevations are going to affect your ability to degas. And I can tell you here in southern Alberta, I'm going to have to do this quite a bit longer than that, probably triple that to get all the gas out. And so imagine if I had to do all that by hand. It's a good idea to let it stop or slow down before you fire it in the opposite direction. All right, so I went back and forth about 30 seconds or so, give or take, each direction. And I did that not for 2 to 4 minutes, but I did that, it was about 8 minutes or so. I'm going to add the packet of Kieselsoll. This is a thinning agent. It's put in here to help remove suspended particles to start the clearing process. I'm going to give that a good stir. Okay, next you're going to get your airlock, and this is the one I'm using here. Fill it half full with potassium metasulfite or some other solution similar to that. Make sure that the inside of the neck is good and dry, and that the rubber is good and dry, or the silicone in this case I should say is good and dry. The silicone will not stay in place very well if it's wet, so just be aware. And you can see at the top of it there's space, so that piece in there floats. Air comes up through the middle, pushes that up, goes down around, and then up out through these tiny little holes on top. All right, so that's the end of day 14, the stabilizing and degassing day. Okay, we are going to check back here again tomorrow. Day 15 is clearing, and see you then. Okay, so now we're on to the day 15, which is the clearing stage. So we're going to take the airlock out. Carefully leave it upright because there is solution in there. I'll just put that aside. And now the directions say stir in Gewurztraminer, which I have right here, and I'll just hold it up to the camera. There you go. We're going to pour that in carefully. Okay, and so the Gewurztraminer is another thinning agent, and that helps to remove the suspended particles, giving us a more clear and stable wine. Okay, so that's a pretty important step. Okay, now it says to stir it in, and then it says replace the airlock and leave the wine sit in a warm 20 to 25 degrees Celsius or 68 to 77 degree Fahrenheit undisturbed area away from direct heat and light. And then after 5 days, we give it a twist. I'm going to tell you this now because I may not film this in 5 days. But what you want to do, what they're talking about is, even though the particles in the wine have started to fall down to the bottom, some of the particles could be stuck to the sides of the glass. So just giving it a twist like this, that causes enough sideways motion of the water to kind of pull those particles off the sides and let them fall to the bottom as well. Topping up the carboy during the clearing process is not required. If choosing to top up, use a similar style of wine. Do not use water. Okay, perfect, great. I'm going to stir that Gewurztraminer in now that that's in there, and we're just going to let her sit. And that will do it, my friends. Reseat this. Keeps air from going in. Okay, perfect. Good, good. Right on. Hey everyone. Wow, how time flies. Look at that. Okay, the last time we spoke, we were on day 15 or 16, something like that, and we had started the clearing process. Now, 5 days into that, I gave the carboy a quick twist, and it's been sitting about 7 days since. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is check the clearing. I'm just going to pull my airlock out. Put that aside. I'm going to take a sample of the wine, and it looks really clear in the glass carboy, so I'm really hopeful that it's done clearing. If not, we just give it a bit more time. Put it in a small glass that's very clear. I know some different people have glass test tubes or vials. Basically, you just want
to have a spot where you can see through very easily with a light and see what you see. You shouldn't see any floaties. So this looks really, really good. Of course, you probably know from previous videos or just from experience that filtering will not clear cloudy wine. I'm going to pour most of it back in the carboy so it's not being wasted, but I'm going to leave a tiny bit just so I can taste it. And that's coming along really nicely. I'm happy with that. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that it's perfectly clear, and if it wasn't, you just let it sit a little bit longer. But this is perfectly clear. So we are going to rack it. Basically, we're going to take this from this carboy, put it into another sanitized carboy. And at this point, because I typically keep my wine for more than about 3 months or so, I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of potassium metasulfite. That just helps to preserve the flavor and the color of the wine. You know, obviously preservatives are optional. Your wine just doesn't keep as long. So it's really up to you what you do. But some of my wine, if I have more than one batch going, it can sit for quite a long time. So 1/4 teaspoon of potassium metasulfite and you're good to go. Okay, so now I've got a second clean carboy. It's down below the first one. I've got my siphon tube nice and clear. If you're filtering your wine, you're going to want to filter it at this point. I don't filter my wine. At least I haven't up until this point. And it's always been good. One day I will, but just not on this batch. And speaking of adding preservatives, let me know if you make wine, do you add preservatives? Do you add the potassium metasulfite and whatnot to your wine? And if you don't, how long does it keep for you? Or do you drink it really quick? So comment below, let me know. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to comment below as well. And don't forget to click on that little like button on the bottom of the video. And if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe, because we put out lots of great content regarding, you know, wine, food, and travel. So lots of neat stuff. We post regularly and we'd love to have you as part of our family. Okay, so you can see I've got a pretty good flow going. I've taped the tube to the bucket. That just helps to keep it from moving around. If the tube gets moved at all, it's not going to disturb the long, firm plastic piece that's sitting over in the corner. That way we're not stirring up any sediment. Okay, and the flow's going good, so I'm going to add the 1/4 teaspoon, of potassium metasulfite. It's in there nicely. We're just going to let that continue to siphon into the second carboy. Then I'll put this carboy up into the setup that I have here, the double boiler type of setup. And that just helps to keep the temperature constant without putting the heat belt right on the glass. Then we're going to let it sit for a couple more days before bottling.
I forgot to empty the water from the bucket. The siphon was going well until it was nearing the end, and physics unfortunately took over. The almost empty carboy began to float in the bucket of water, stirring up the sediment and thankfully stopping the siphon, but approximately 2 bottles worth of wine became unusable without me having to clear it again.
Okay, so I've got this one in here now. You can see I've got a nice little post-it note that says empty primary before siphoning, so I don't make the same mistake again when I'm bottling. This here I'm going to leave, it says a minimum of 2 days, so I'll probably leave it 2-3 days. You don't want to leave it too long at this point, especially now because I lost so much wine because of my mistake. The wine level is actually down to here. Normally it's the closer to the neck the better, and mine is usually sitting up close to just above this top ridge here, but now I'm down a lot. So that's a lot of air in there that's being exposed to the wine. So we really don't want to leave it in there too long. There are ways you can get around having too much in there. I've heard of people using marbles and other contraptions to do it, but I haven't experimented with that, and my wine's always been pretty good. I just don't leave it in here to age. So if you were doing that, for sure you would want that level up quite high. Anyways, a lot of different ideas as to how to do that. Feel free to comment on your ideas too. Let me know what you do. But a couple of days, we're going to bottle, get it out of here. For now, it's in here at the constant temperature. I don't have a solid bung. If you have one, use one. If you don't, you can use your airlock. That will suffice as well. Hey everyone, okay, so it is bottling day. So you can see here I've got things set up already for siphoning. I've got the stiff tube in there. I've also got the stiff tube secured by tape to the primary bucket. That way when I'm moving the tube around, it is not going to be disturbing the stiff part that's in there, because we don't want that stirring any sediment up in the carboy. Now, I've got this on a bit of an angle, and I did that very carefully not to disturb anything. This one here has virtually no sediment in the bottom of this carboy, so it is safe to do this on an angle, and what that's going to do is allow me to get more wine out of the carboy than what the siphon would normally do when there's a greater amount sitting level. So I've got that set up. I've got my wine bottles. I'm going to grab one, siphon it, and do that until all the bottles are done. Then once they're all done, I'm going to cork them and let them sit upright for a couple of days before laying them down with the rest of my collection. I've got a nice strong siphon here. The bottles are filling up really quickly. Just filling them up to the neck. We're keeping the tube right in the wine so we're not getting any aeration. All right, time to start corking the wine. All right, so this is the finished product. Thanks for watching our video on winemaking. This is our Gewurztraminer wine and the second winemaking video I've made. Now, if you want to see the winemaking process of a kit, including all the steps of washing, sanitizing, everything you need to do to make sure that you don't contaminate your wine from the very beginning to the very end, you're going to want to click up here. There's going to be a link up above somewhere, and that will take you to our winemaking series that we did, and that was a Merlot wine. Otherwise, thanks for watching Scenic Sights and Bites. Go ahead and click the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. We've got lots of great content for you. I am Zach, and thank you for watching.